and we'll get the show on the road. Share screen. And here we go. Okay, today we're talking about Grantor indexes. And I've titled this various things at times. What you see in front of you is the lead to deeds. Something inspired me early this morning when I said something rhymes. But I wanted to talk to you about Grantor indexes because they really are a pretty easy thing to use. And they're a great friend to you if you're trying to find a piece of land. Of course, we have a totally different presentation that we do and that I have out online, but I'm happy to do it again on homestead records because there we're going to go to glowrecords.blm.gov and we can see at least the original people and what they originally got for land. But today I'm talking about what happens once you have registered that first deed, or once someone has, what happens with that land and how do you find it as you are going through a process? And so without further ado, I am going to go to the slideshow from the beginning. And hopefully what you're seeing is the lead to the deeds. Hopefully that will help you. So it's very interesting to see. Whoops, I need to just go backspace, I think, the lead to deeds. It's very interesting to see what is out there to be able to help you. I will tell you from just having done the various kinds of indexes recently in Montana, and I've always been more familiar with things like Pennsylvania and Ohio and Arizona in looking at deeds in those states, but I can tell you that these Grantor indexes are going to vary a little bit. They have some things in common that they do for you, and that's very good. So without further ado, let's take a look. They are your great friend. Now I'll tell you, in some places, especially that I've seen in the eastern half of the United States, sometimes they get called direct or indirect indexes, but they are the very same thing. You need to know about these before you go to the courthouse because you don't want to waste your time. One of the first things, of course, is finding out before you get to the courthouse what indexes are readily available. And generally, you can do that by looking at your courthouse online. But if you don't get online, then be prepared that day to ask very nicely for where the land records are, the Grantor indexes, the deed indexes, and the land records. Be aware of the fact that sometimes people who are serving you in the courthouse are new to the job. They may not know all the ins and outs that you even know about these kinds of records. So put your kind voice on and be patient, because there's probably going to be some finder guides available before you start your search. At least a listing of which of these grantee indexes or grantor indexes are available in which books. And maybe you're even going to find out they're online. I can tell you in Montana, Family Search has put at least 7 counties worth out online. I keep hoping that they'll do some more for North Dakota, but I haven't seen that yet. But you might find those finder guides that can help you. So your goal, my goal, our goal is to know which counties have the records you need. That's kind of an ominous thing, I'll tell you. And also to know the ins and outs of using the grantor grantee indexes before you go to the county courthouse. So that's what we're going to try to do today, is show you what's available and give you just a wee bit of familiarity and give you some advice from me, who's been out in those records and have silently groaned at times with what I've found. First of all, what I've found out is that we need to know which counties these records involve. Now, even if I'm looking at Cascade County in Montana, I need to know what the parent counties of Cascade County were, because I might find more records or a kind of different record at that other county. So it isn't enough just to know the current county unless the record is very recent. Anything before 1923, 1924 in Montana, for example, that is the last time that we put in a new county, when we put in Lake County. But anything before that, you're having to look at parent county records in some instances. First of all, I'm going to give you some guidance with something that I recommend. It's called Courthouse Research for Family Historians by Christine Rose. She's got a second edition. She wrote the first one in like 2004 or 2006, and boy, that baby just promptly sold out. She has a second edition, which brought us with her records into the world of stuff online. And so I'm going to recommend the second edition for you. It's about $35, I believe, but it's chock full of next things that you can do, so you never bat out at all. You're going to be able to find what you want, because her advice on various kinds of indexes stretches throughout her text. I'm going to show you what a couple of them look like. She's actually got two books that I like. This is the one for the 2019 edition, the Courthouse Research book. And she has another one. This one is updated, and your clue is you want to get the one for this one that says updated, and it's the second edition, 2019. The other one that she has that I'm not aware has been updated is a 2000 edition that she calls Courthouse Indexes Illustrated. Remember, in 2006, we still didn't have too much access to the internet. It was harder to put things out, and she's done a great job of showing you some very, I call them exotic indexes. The earlier that you go in the United States history, the more that people who were keeping records had to do to make sure that they could keep indexes current and usable by them and by their public. So there are some very different kinds of things. Yes.
Excuse me a second. We're only seeing the lead screen of your PowerPoint. We're not seeing any of the following ones.
Oh, boy. All right, we'll go back. I'm screen sharing. Yeah. I'm going to go back. I'm going to stop the share and hit it again and see what happened, but it should be there. Okay, it says I'm screen sharing. That we should be back to lead to deeds. I'm going to try to go to the second one. It says the genealogist's great friend. Are you seeing that? Jan Boyle says yes, she is. Okay, and Debbie gave me a thumbs up. So I'm going to go forward now to the screen where I was working. Am I still okay? Thank you
Yes,
for
you
giving
are.
me the thumbs ups.
Yep.
Okay, so this is where I was. This Courthouse Indexes Illustrated by Christine Rose. She did it in 2006, but she's got some great explanations for some things that you're going to need if you are working at all out of state and working into the central United States and the eastern United States. You're going to want to see these things. And there's only a couple of things that are illustrated out online. I looked this morning, and unless you go out to Pennsylvania and get into some of the records, and I know how to dig into them, it's not a brief explanation. You're going to need something like this to look at so that you know what you're asking about, because even records like Pennsylvania, they're out online. You can find them, but you might not know what you're looking at or how to operate inside unless you've looked at some of these different kinds of indexes. A little later this spring, maybe a couple of shows from now, I'll do some of those indexes and illustrate them. They should only take about 15 or 20 minutes a piece, and then you'll at least have a place to go so you know how to find them. We can make some brief YouTube thingies. So is this one coming up, Debbie? No, before you go? Okay,
Yes,
I'm
it
relying
is.
on Debbie to help me here. So I'm going to ask you, first of all, today, in 2006, we would have said, go to the book first. I'm going to tell you today that you need to go out online before you go to see what's available at the county and at the state and at national sites, because there's stuff that is fast coming on. I know, for example, our Cascade County records are online. We're one of 7 places in Montana that have them online, and many other places do too, as they've been released, especially if they were first in Family Search. They're coming out online. So you want to see what's available. And of course, you're like me. If you find them, you're going to begin your search. Please take time to go through your notes from this presentation today before you begin the search. Otherwise, in about a half hour, you will have made yourself dizzy. Use the insights below because we want you to be successful. So let me show you what's online, for example, just for Montana from Family Search. There's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Pardon me, there's 10 states online from Montana. There's Cascade and Flathead and Granite, Lake, Mar, Ponderay, Rosebud, Sanders, Teton, and Yellowstone so far. And I can tell you at least one of those has come online in the last year. So they're continuing to do this. So please check out to see what's online. And remember, at Family Search, if you're going to check a state, it's as easy as this. Go out, pull down to the search button at Family Search, put in the state first, like Ohio, and then comma, and then put in the county to see if it's there. My recommendation, in fact, is just put in the state first, and a listing like this one for Montana should come up so you'll know what's even available in that state from Family Search, because they are doing a great job of getting these records out. We don't have to always go into a book anymore to find all of these, although you're going to need to check and see if they put everything out there. So now I like this site called Random Acts of Genealogical Kindness. I don't know if you use that site, but if you don't, it's free and you should go out and explore it today. It's wonderful. It's just got this neat thing at the beginning. I just put in raogk.org to bring up everything. I don't even go as far as I did with this one with Montana and Lake County, but they'll tell you everything that they have. In fact, they'll show you the map of Lake County promptly of the current one. They'll show you who it's bordered by and the cities, and then they're going to show you what's there, that you can find courthouse records and census records and so on, because people who perform random acts of genealogical kindness have put them there. So I really like that site and I highly recommend it to you, especially if you're working in a state that you're unfamiliar with. Well, as the third thing, we can go out and check the county at its official site, and hopefully you're seeing this. I'm just showing you the one for Cascade County, montana.gov. And it really is a pretty neat thing because you can look at its departments. You can sometimes get its regulations. Sometimes it's even going to show you for a couple of our smaller places in Montana and also for Missoula County and Flathead County, it's going to show you what they have that's available because they've also put their stuff out. And of course, we all need Cindy's list. And so I've given you the call for that, where you can find Cindy's list. If you haven't used Cindy's list before to see what all is available someplace, you need to go out and look at this vast thing because it's got to be close to 25 years old now. And just alone in categories for land, she does bounty land, she does Google Earth and how to use it, she does homesteads, how to use land descriptions, measurements, and surveys. She does platting and mapping, publications, housing and building histories, all kinds of things. For those of us who generally our people came from poverty, she does those poorhouses and poverty and taxes and how to get information when your people don't have any land, but they paid rent on it or they did something with it in some way. And she'll also go over those wonderful poll taxes that most all states have had that are there for Men, whether or not they have land, they had to be 21 or over generally, unless they had a different date on it. But a poll tax was there. They had to pay it as soon as they entered a community to help take care of the poor, generally $2 a year. That's the real general kind of thing. And then also, they also paid a road tax no matter what to help build the roads. Now, they could work that tax off, so you might even find more information there. But look at these lists because they can be helpful. And then if all else fails, go to your local library because they will do a great job of helping you. And we're also here to help you too. If you would like to give us a call or just join in with the conversation every 2 weeks. So get ready for that courthouse experience. I'm just happening to show the Whitley County Courthouse in Indiana because I found it first this morning and I wanted to key on one. I wanted to show you, by the way, that if you're interested in showing your local courthouse, generally there are free pictures, good free photos of them that you can legally use in your presentations to your family or in your books or whatever. Look carefully at the copyright. So be on your best courthouse behavior, first of all. When you go in, it's so tempting to tell them why you're there. They only want to know that you are there to find these indexes. So ask for the specific location of those indexes. Sometimes they will let you into the actual book rooms, like they do here in Great Falls and in Flathead County and in Missoula. Sometimes you have to be let behind the counter, but they will do that for you generally once you know. So you are after the particular records, the Grantee Index and the Grantor Index. Don't tell them about your genealogy problem. They've heard it all. And don't bring out your data. Just bring a notebook that you can write in. Ask what rules are in place, and if you're permitted to go directly to the books. By the way, only bring a pencil. Don't whip out a pen. Bring a pencil. That's good behavior on our part. Keep your work area really compact. Even if no one else is in there when you go in, don't spread out. Other people may come in. And so you don't want to spread out. Speak quietly if you have a friend with you. Don't use your phone in that room. And return the books to the right shelves. Don't ask for any special privileges like, will you keep this for me, this book with this in here for 3 days until I can come back? Just note the page number again. You may see somebody who's really nice and volunteers to do that for you, but please don't do that for you. And remember to say thanks when you leave. Even a thank you note is not out of the question. So now you've arrived at the courthouse. You found the right courthouse, first of all, and you know that the records are there. They're not stored off-site. Yeah, some of these records could be stored off-site, so you need to make a quick call beforehand or read all of their information carefully. Generally, if they have stuff stored off-site, they will tell you right in their explanations. So then you know that your first question would be, are the Grantee, Grantor indexes available right here, or are they off-site? You have a notebook, you have a pencil. Remember, when you find, because you probably will find a mistake in these records, don't correct it. We've had people say, can't I correct it? Can't I whatever? And even go up and ask the person if they can correct it. Do not do that. Write a note, a very specific note to the clerk about the mistake you found, giving the page number and all of those things, but do not write anything ever in those books. First of all, in your notebook, take note of the first book that you're looking at, whether it is the grantee, that's the person who's buying the land, or you're interested in who sold the land, so you're over in the grantor book. But take time to look at it and do the exact same thing in your notebook right at the top of the page. You want it to be exact. You don't want to look at your records later on and say, I can't make sense of this now. I don't know. I took so many things down. I don't know what I'm doing. So take pictures if they'll let you. And I would ask that beforehand. May I take a picture? May I use my scanning device on my phone? Because that might be a different way for you to get it. I have a small scanner, a 5x7 scanner that fits right over a record. And I have asked 2 places and they have allowed me to use it once they saw how it functioned. But ask beforehand. And if someone else comes and tells you from that office that, no, you can't do that, just accede quietly and go back and take pencil paper records. So here's some ins and outs. Is there a parent county that you have to be concerned about? I'm giving you clues today from Lake and Flathead County, but I will tell you that, for instance, one of the states where you really have to be careful of parent county information is Virginia. Their counties really changed over time. And they started so early on that you are going to have multiple places that you might be looking for records. Now, the good news is that generally when a new county starts, they are given money to actually have somebody copy those records over so they've got their own copy of the records. But I always go back to the original parent county because I want to know if somebody copied something wrong or if they did an exact copy. I just at least want to check that out. So I'm picky, I admit it, but I think it's a good kind of picky. You need to know how the indexes are arranged because every county is slightly different in their property department, and it can change across time. They'll maybe tell you, yep, the first 18 books are arranged this way, and now we have them over in another area. We've done something else with them. You need to know what is unique to that county because they don't think it's unique. It's just how they're doing it. But they may write the descriptions totally differently. And I mean that from one year to the next. So look at the headings, because when you get a new person in the department, say a new treasurer who has charge of those records, they may choose to put all the information they need into a different descriptor, into a different way in a book. And suddenly those label tops that you've been looking at on a scanned copy are not showing the same things where you thought they should. Sometimes the records are online, but they may not be well described. Sometimes they'll just say that we have them. So you're going to have to go look. And before I start recording information, I want to at least go through, my preference is at least 50, flipping through at least 50 of the pages online so that I can see if anything changes or kind of get the lay of the land so I can see what it looks like. And always, 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 because you're looking at indexes, recognize that your final goal is that deed. It is not good enough to get just the indexes. And we'll talk about places where they say the records were burned and they're not available and so on near the end, because Christine Rose, I think, I would tell you mine, but it agrees with her, and she has some really great fun advice for you. So in brief again, if you're taking notes today, remember that grantors sell the land and grantees buy the land. So the very first time, for instance, that you see a homestead recorded in a county, you will see that it is the US government selling. They are the grantor. And the person who settled the homestead is the grantee. There, that takes care of that very first thing if you're concerned about a homestead state. Your notebook helps. You have a notebook in front of you with that pencil, and I recommend that you mimic the actual record. That is, you make an exact copy. Don't stint on this. You are going to be so sorry if you do. If you are of the mind that you want to take pictures of it, I know I have a relative who works better from pictures, then that is fine if you have permission. But you better keep those pictures in order on your camera. You better know what they are, and you better very, very carefully record what that name or that page number is in that journal, because if you're looking at something out online, there's a whole separate thing that also has to be recorded, and that's the image number. So you have to do both of those, the page number and the image number, to make sure you've got it. Otherwise, you're going to confuse yourself. Write the headings, write the page number, I'm telling you here, if you're looking at images, record the exact image. Like I record mine as 109-110 out of 664 images within that book. So I know precisely what I was looking at, in addition to the original page number. So I don't get confused. Also with that, note whether a particular entry covers 1 or 2 pages. Generally, these journals are 2 pages across. If you are seeing a journal that has been copied or it has been imaged, then you need to know precisely what you're looking at. For instance, in Lake County, I can be looking at a book and it says it's page 97, but I better know that there's 2 page 97s for that particular document. And because it's only going to show me the side that I put my viewer on in the first place. So if I put my viewer just on the property, it's only going to show me the property side. It's page 97, but it's property. And I can just easily slip back. I can just use the particular picture and slip over to the other side and see the names. By the way, for what I was doing, because I was looking at precise hunks of land, I found it much more convenient to look at the descriptors. I got myself used to what I needed to look for. I needed to look for town site number 26. I needed to look for its components in various phases, and that's strictly what I looked for. I was only looking for the township and the range. That helped me. Township 26, range 19 west. So get yourself acclimated to that. If you're looking up more than one piece of land, of course, that won't look. Then you're going to want to go to the index. But I'll tell you, the indexes, you're going to look through many, many, many pages, because yes, the A's are together, but you might find Astrid right beside Adam. And so you're going to have to look right to the end of the index to make sure you got the name time and again, because it can happen again. Your own observations, and you will have them, you should have them, write them at the bottom of your note. I signed mine, JDT, so I know that it was my observation and not part of the original record. I'll have a note and say, you know, Evans bought this land according to the index, but when I looked at the deed, both Kelly and Evans were there on this document. So those are my kinds of notes, because I'm not any better than any of us. We're not going to remember 2 weeks later. Regarding those counties that are spawned from parent counties, like Missoula County was the parent county for most of Western Montana, actually. And it starts as in 1860. It's pretty well defined in 1860, actually in Idaho Territory. And it doesn't change that much when it comes online as a county in 1864 when we become a territory. Then it covers most all of Western Montana. And there are no changes until 1893 when Flathead County splits off from that. So now Flathead County has a parent county, Missoula. And later on, when Lake County comes online in 1923, it has 2 parent counties because the land was taken from both Missoula and Flathead County to make Lake County. So Lake County got 500 square miles from the north end of Missoula and 1,200 square miles from the south end of Flathead. So now you're looking at several things. That's why you want to keep track of that very carefully. Did the new county do a thorough job of copying the land records from the parent county? There will be special indexes. I've already quoted to you that in Lake County, that Lake County starts in 1923. So I've got a clue out online. It's ending there in 1923. Lake County, I've got some records that say 1893 to 1923. Well, those are all from Flathead County, and they were recopied. You're going to want to go to those first so that you've got the lay of the land. Or if you're looking at Flathead County, for example, there's a listing there right online, out online in the records, it says 1860 to 1893. Well, that tells you that those are the records that were copied over from that first county. Again, I'm just going to give you what I think is some best advice. Look at both of those counties, even though you know that the county records were copied. I don't have a lot of confidence after seeing that in Cascade County, when we split off from Choteau County, they gave a contract to a guy by the name of Phil Gibson. He was Paris Gibson's son. He was supposed to go down to Choteau and copy the records. 6 months later, I see that they finally had to give the contract to someone else, and the guy couldn't get to it for a while. And I had to find that in the commission records. So the stuff didn't get done when it was supposed to in our county. And look for indications that all those copied records were taken to their final conclusion, that the deed is also there. Sometimes they'll tell you it's in another county, and you'll have to proceed from there. But most of the time, you will find that these people eventually have copied all of these. Become familiar with terminology and don't bother the clerks. Et al., we all know that that means and others. But that's a great clue for you because it means there's more names on that deed or on that mortgage or anything, because you're going to see et al. There. So it means there are more parties to this particular thing. QCD, quitclaim deeds. You'll see those all the way through things where people were, after a will was probated, they were trying to just make sure that people signed off and said that they knew they were not entitled to any of the land because it had been given to someone else in a will, for example. And that's just one example of a quitclaim deed. Consideration. Consideration, it'll say for consideration. They got this land for consideration. It's very specific to a particular transaction. Here's some things that happen. People only want to put $1 in there because they don't think it's anybody else's business what someone paid for the land or what someone got for the land. That can happen. Others will say, I don't mind. You can put the $1,900 on that line. And so that's the money exchange. Sometimes you're going to see a thing for love and consideration or affection. And you know that money did not cross hands in that case, but there might be something more there in the records that tells you why that was there. Or there might be an exchange, a straight exchange for another property. So you need to investigate those. Consideration was a big one for me in looking at all of these things. And if you intend to just take your phone along and look up the law terminology on your phone, please go out and look at the Black's Law dictionaries out online and look at them for the various eras, because their definitions change too. Black's Law Dictionary is free for you out online in several renditions. You're going to find one that pertains to like 1900 to 1915. If you're dealing with land at that point and you're looking up a definition, you are probably going to want to use that particular dictionary. They're fast and they're easy to use. And yes, you can find them on your phone if you've got a smartphone. I put them in my favorites. Okay, here's 6 or 7 or whatever helps as you use these Grantor Grantee Indexes. You are going to be the one doing the research unless you hire someone, not in that office, but you hire someone else to do that research for you. And commonly they'll have a statement, just like Lake County has a statement. The clerk's office does not do research, it says. Most staff will assist people in finding the initial material, but it's up to the individual to do the research. They will tell you they do not have the time to come back and find another book for you and take you to the next thing. They expect you to get the lay of the land and figure it out. Be aware of index limitations with names. It doesn't mean, even though the fellow's name is Kelly, it doesn't mean that it's always spelled K-E-L-L-Y. It could be K-E-L-L-E-Y, K-E-L-I-E, K-E-L-L-I-E, K-E-L-L-E, for example. And you're also depending on the clerk who wrote this particular thing. So please be very careful and be aware of the way in which the name is put in as a limitation. Also, be aware of the fact that generally, when they're making an index, remember, an index is just, it's the hint that you need to be able to find the record. So they may have only named one of the persons. If you only use that index and say, yep, I am positive that L.O. Evans was the only one who bought that land. I don't know how Kelly got that land from him later, then you haven't looked at the deed. The deed will tell you, hopefully, the correct spelling of the name, we hope. But more important even, it will tell you whether one or more names are on that particular property. And this is really big. I'm showing a map here for a very famous place in Montana at the base of Swan Lake over in western Montana. That hunk of land that is in the darker orange was purchased, all 107 acres. When I first looked at it, it said L.O. Evans bought that 107 acres from Roy Campbell in 1908. And if I hadn't looked further, I would not realize that Cornelius Francis Kelly of Anaconda Copper fame was the other buyer, the co-purchaser. Very, very important because they actually took this from 107 acres to several thousand acres over the years. And so it's important to look back, take the time to look back. If you're not going to look back, if you're going to do all your index work first and then go back and look at the deeds, make a date with yourself to spend the last hour looking for the deeds and getting them. Because otherwise, you might say, oh, it's probably not important, or it's whatever. I've got one name, it won't matter. It does matter, especially when you're attempting to source a land document. So Achill, this is very tough probably to see, but this is that example where I saw L.O. Evans and C.F. Kelly buying this. Because by the way, when we looked at Kelly, Kelly got spelled throughout the book consistently in Flathead County with K-E-L-L-Y. In Lake County, they took the time to do K-E-L-L-E-Y. That's a difference. Oh, and by the way, I'll just go back to that and say that you can see that it was a deed. It'll tell you over to the right, right before the number of acres, it'll tell you what kind of deed it was. It was a warranty deed. Was a mistake made as the index was prepared? Wrong spellings, that Kelly for Kelly. Multiple owners. Do you know how many Kellys there are in each and every one of these? That's a very, very common name. And so you want to look very carefully. Did clerks miscopy something into a wrong ledger? That also happens. And you won't always see that they came back to correct that ledger. Sometimes they'll correct it through a crossout. Then you know, and they might make a little note over to the left saying, you know, mistake or whatever. But other times they'll just correct it in a new entry later on whenever they find it. And so you have to look pretty thoroughly through these records. Look, I always look 10 to 15 years at least beyond when I think that that land was finally sold, or I'm looking at a particular thing and I just need to know it for my purposes. It doesn't take that long to do because they're not super long, but then you'll know whether or not there was ever a correction. You can also, if you think something is hinky, I check the opposite index. If I've been looking at the Grantee Index, I'll say, something doesn't look right with that. And I'll go grab the Grantor Index for the same thing and look at it. Because remember, when they're putting it into the Grantee Index, we get the advantage of them also putting the opposite thing for the seller into the Grantor Index. So you have two sets of records that you can look at right away. This generally goes for most Western states, and especially the homestead states. I will tell you that very occasionally back east, you are going to come across some combined things. And sometimes for a small county, you might come across a combined ledger, and you need to look carefully because the grantee might be in the front of the book. The grantor is in the back of the book because they didn't need any more space. So really acquaint yourself with these books. And watch out for numbering mistakes. They're the most frequent thing I've found. A number might get inadvertently reused, or something gets transposed and you don't notice it until you get to the deed. The deed has been checked again and again. So if you want to make sure of that final number on a deed, you want to look there. Some transcriptions are really brief. They don't tell you what you need. If you're looking at this, this is when my grandma, Mary N. Lee, gave my uncle, Jack, some land, because it was her land up in Ferndale. She did that on December 6th in 1954, I believe. And down below, it's really disappointing. It says description of property. It says see the record. Well, I absolutely already knew that a whole bunch of her family got land from her because she got 160 acres. But I knew that Jack didn't get all of that. And it just says that it's in Township 26, in Range 19, and in Section 3. And it doesn't tell you what he got. Well, he actually got just 20 acres. So you have to look further. Especially when you see the record or see the bigger description or whatever. That's a real hint and a clue that you better go pursue that right away. A correction may be noted. There was a correction for what my grandma did, Mary Ann Lee. She gave her son Orrin some land too, another 20 acres, and they had to correct that deed later on. And this was an actual correction and said it was a correction for the deed. And you'll usually see that it's a correction, not just a correction for a deed, but it's a correction, and it'll tell you what kind of a correction it is. Be aware of great ranges in time between the transaction and its official recording. Here's one where a fella up in my area in 1964, Fred Lechner, got some land from Fred and Helen Nickel in 1964, and he did not see the need. Those people, by the way, moved out of state. In fact, they moved out of the country to Canada, but he did not see the need. Fred did not until 1977, 13 years later. And so you don't get both sides of that deed. There was a grantor, but not a grantee at that point. Or pardon me, a grantee, but not a grantor at that point. So be very, very careful, because this one got right down to the nitty gritty. This one was just 10 acres of that same thing I'd been looking at that my grandparents gave to people. So you need to look very carefully. Land transactions often, especially in the early years of the United States, are recorded decades later. Until you're getting ready to sell it again or give it to another person, generally you're not compelled to go in and record that deed and say, this is what I've got and this is where it's going next. In this case, Max Lauterbach, who was he was a serial purchaser of many lands. He was well, let's just say he had a lot of land. He bought this from the state of Montana, and it was given to him in 1916, and he didn't get it recorded until 1944. Now, this was the unfortunate thing. Between 1916, when he bought that in Flathead County, and 1944, when he sold that, or when he finally recorded it and said this event happened, we had a total change in county. We had Lake County come in on its thing. On the other hand, now we have two places we can look to see what that looked like. So that's very good. Be aware of those records, both the grantee side, the grantor side, and then if it's gone to another county, you have the advantage of looking at another transcription. If an item you want isn't listed and you know you have the right time frame, you need to look carefully at what the copyist or the clerk was doing. Look at the bottom of the page to see if they've continued it someplace else. It can even be 2 pages over. Somebody inadvertently skips a page. They don't even realize that they pulled up 2 pages, meant to only pull up 1. And so check those things. They might direct you to another index book. Don't expect that the clerks, even who are working at the same time, are going to be consistent with one another. there will be differences of a type. Even if they agree on certain things, there will be differences. And don't expect that the later indexes are going to be consistent with what you saw earlier. Every single time you pick up a new index, take a careful look at the top of it and make sure that you've put those headings in again, because, or drawn arrows or whatever it is you're going to do, or take a picture. But don't expect them to be consistent, and don't expect them especially to be consistent with the parent county. Consistently, I have found that they do things differently. They rearrange that book. They put all the same information in, but they arrange it differently. So here where we get to the thing where you're at the courthouse. It's only happened to me once, but they, meaning the courthouse clerk, said the records were burned. Now, Christine Rose says they could have been burned. There's a whole list of burned counties for you, very easy to find out at Family Search. It's very easy, just in their thing. Once you get to their wiki, just look for burned counties. They list every one of them so that it's easy for you to see. But I like what Christine Rose did in her book. She says, yeah, when somebody says that the records were burned or they're not located or they can't be found, she says that shouldn't stop you. She says, ask what year the fire occurred. That's one of the only times you can be a PIA to them. The fire might not have affected the record for the years you want. You can say, oh, well, I wanted these records. So what year did they burn? Ask what records might have survived. And most important, ask how records have been reconstructed since the fire, because land records are very important. And believe me, they have reconstructed them in some format, even if it is not in the precise original format. Sometimes for those burned counties, you have to pick up the latest or the very last item for whoever had that land later on. And you can do that in Grantor Indexes by looking at the precise land description. Then you can look over at the opposite page and find who was involved in that transaction, and that helps you to go backward again. But they always make an effort with that. So be patient, smile a lot, and then if you still get the consistent thing that says that the records were burned or they're not available, go out and take a look at Family Search and take some more advice. Finally, don't depend on real estate transfer ads in the newspaper. Real estate transfers were really, really important. They had to be reported in some way. And so real estate companies would do that as a part of their ad weekly in weekly newspapers, or, they still sometimes do that in really, really small counties or in rural areas. Don't count on that. They, especially early on in newspapers, they could have transposed the data and given you the wrong land descriptors, given you information. It just says John Locke's Ed Ux to R.C. Heath, this big land description in Township 26, Range 19, Section 1 for $1,600. Well, Ed Ux or Ed Uxor is the Latin phrase meaning and wife. Now, I will just tell you, we don't have time to go into it today, but if that happened anytime, and the latest that I found Dower mentioned in Montana records was 1956 in a record in Great Falls here. But you need to be concerned about the and wife and follow that record to the end with the deed to see if the wife willingly gave up the dower. That can only be given up in a private court hearing in which her husband does not participate and no one else does except the judge and her, in order to freely give up that particular thing. So when you see and wife at Ux, you need to be concerned and follow that all the way to the end with the deed. Well, there are sometimes other courthouse records that may have the property documents you need. Examine the indexes. They may have other indexes, and unless you ask for them, saying, are there other land indexes, they are not going to tell you, because that's not what you asked for. They do their work very precisely. Sometimes the courthouse has only a general index to deeds, or even indeed just a general index to many kinds of records. Then you're going to have to be prepared to take a lot of time, but it's worth it. You can look at mortgage records and indices and be aware that these may be mixed in with grantor or grantee index items. You just may see it over there in there where it says type of deed, it says it's a mortgage. Then you know that they've mixed some of those things, but it still doesn't mean they don't have a separate mortgage index that is arranged the same way as, the person who receives and the person who sells. Same thing with wills. You'll see another thing here toward the end where I'll show you the lingo or the language for that. And again, don't assume that the next book is going to be similarly arranged, because you get a new clerk, they do something slightly different. They still do the exact things that the state demands be in that record, but they do it differently, and you may be missing out on information. Here's that thing that occurs with wills of people who created a will, and then the land was the particular property, and the estate was probated. Divisor, divisee indexes. Some states have these, and they are arranged the same. I'll tell you, the one I did not expect to ever see, because a lot of their other records are not very good, but North Carolina has this critter. And they do one of the best jobs, I think, of it, from way back, from like I think the latest I looked back and there was about probably 1845 for probated will, but they did have divisor, divisee. It won't be everywhere, but if it is, yahoo, because boy, that's a really great way for you to find out who got the land next and who didn't get the land, because you won't know that unless you look in the will and how the probate is actually carried out, how it finally ends. It isn't enough just to look at the will, by the way. You've got to look at that probate and see how everything ends. So that's a little bit about Grantor indexes. Next time, and this fall, I talked to you about Randy Major's site and just told you that you might want to go there. But I'm going to show you next time 3 fantastic things you can do to make maps for just this kind of thing I've been showing you today, because with regard to my research that I'm doing on Ferndale for a history of the community, I've been able to map almost every single one of these. It's been fun. It hasn't taken long. I could either use the GLOW records out at glowrecords.blm.gov and get what they were originally given if it was an original homestead, or I could use that to figure out how to slice the land up a little further and still give me an idea of what people got. I haven't been able to get down to small acreages like 20 acres, but it's been fun doing it and it's been easy, and the Randy Major stuff is free. So that's what I'm going to do on January 24th. I'm going to turn back to and stop the share now, and you can unmute yourself if you have questions. And by the way, did anyone get the notes from Mary yet? Have they come?
Jan,
Yeah.
it's Peggy.
Hi,
Hi,
Peggy. How are you?
I'm great. Great presentation. Just a kind of a global question. Is this approach with these indexes one of the best ways just to start answering the question, what happened to my great-grandfather's land when he died?
Yes. Yes, it is. Because Peggy, no matter what, if he died intestate, that is, he didn't have a will, there still has to be an inventory that occurs. And the inventory generally, you're going to have a public administrator or somebody saying, well, he didn't write a will, so we have to inventory what he has so we can see what there is to sell to settle the debts that person might have. And so that's one way to begin to get the information. Sometimes I'll warn you, Peggy, those will drag on. I've seen one for Teton County that dragged on for over 10 years as family fought over the land. And believe me, you need to follow every single hearing with that. It's very important that you get the actual hearing information because there are twists and turns. But yeah, in my opinion, yes, it takes some time, Peggy, but it is absolutely a great way to be able to find who got that land, what happened to it. Another thing would be back in those records, for instance, in Pennsylvania, the other thing you can do is you can look at the land records for the next 5 years, but only look at that descriptor. Become familiar with the descriptor, and that's tough because you're looking at meets and bounds, but there will be some really neat words right at the beginning that distinguish that in, say, the first 3 to 5 lines. And so you can skim those records again. And if it's not readily apparent who got that land, I have skimmed before and I was lucky. I was very lucky. No, I didn't find the noble land back in Pennsylvania, but I was very lucky and I did find who got the land once somebody went to Canada just by looking at the meets and bounds, because it was someone who was not connected. They'd gone to Canada, they died there. The land was still in contention back in in Susquehanna, and I was able to determine who finally picked that up. It took me a while. I'll warn you. Good question. Anyone else, or did I put you to sleep? I can tell you, I've just had a very rewarding experience working with the indexes that are available. And I'm very, very grateful for the people who managed to get them and put them out online. If you have a county that is not out online, I would suggest 2 things to you. I would ask your county person who is doing that, not if it's out online, but when it is going to be out online, because it is, it is public information. And the other thing that I would ask is I would go out to Family Search, because that's a really good place to start, or those random acts of kindness, folks, and ask who's doing that, because believe it or not, there are people who are willing to go and scan those records and put them in. And that's a very good thing.
Cool.